Sometimes during closure against the resistance on the opposite side, you might have the potential of an interference. It doesn't happen very often. It might happen once or twice and then it doesn't happen again. Well, here's this non-working interference during closure. A lot of people have these interferences in closure, but they're not problematic because there's a system in design that avoids that. So although the lateral pterygoid is a jaw opener, it can influence the path of closure. I always think about in the movie Apollo 14, the capsule's rocketing through space. They have little jets on the side, and it changes the trajectory of this thing through space. And as this mandible elevates through a bolus, sometimes it needs to slow down on one side. And so when you slow down closure, you fire an opener, and it slows it down on that one side. So here's this masticatory function where the lateral pterygoid contracts to advance the condyle. The superior head of the lateral pterygoid is tensing during closure. And everything's working just fine. And we're showing the extremes of potential where this condyle is achieving its most superior position within the fossa in this particular example. It may never happen any other time, but in this example it happens every single time. Let's make that molar have a little extra bump on it. And when that extra bump resides there, it's now interfering the arc of closure. The condyle can no longer achieve its most superior position because this tooth is interfering its path to CR. When they say interference to CR, it's during closure that the condyle can't arrive there because the interference prevents it from happening. If you're trying to chew on something really, really tough and really squeeze hard, you will clobber that tooth. The lateral pterygoid knows about it and says, look, I'm not going to let this tooth take the beating of elevation. So while you're closing, I'm going to light up a little bit and change trajectory and avoid that interference. It's not going to happen. It's a potential contact. It never really happens. So this lateral pterygoid is now programmed to avoid interferences to CR. It's an adaptive capacity of the system. Now we'll go into restoration and why you need to find these things. Let's say you were going to mount the case and you need to seat the condyles to CR because at some point you need to provide for parafunctional control. You need to figure out where that thing is so you know how to remove it. So an anterior bite stop relieves the lateral pterygoid from acknowledging the interference exists. You'll tap on the deprogrammer several times. Here's a Coist deprogrammer. There's the little anterior bite stop right there. John Cranham has it's a full arch plastic suck down with a little occluding table right there. Maybe the handout will show there's some blue dots right here, and there's a blue dot back on this palatal cusp. So you have the patient tap, 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 tap. The lateral pterygoid starts to think, you know, there's no more posterior potential interference. I can relax here. And so you shave down the dots of where the incisors touch, and all of a sudden, another blue dot shows up. Here's another potential interference to closure to CR. So you eliminate that. Eventually, when you're all done, you have simultaneous contact all the way around. That's the idea of eliminating interferences to CR so you can transfer to your articulator. So the goal is that this interference to CR no longer exists. So in normal purposeful function, when there isn't any necessity to protrude beyond incisor edge to edge. There's no necessity to go beyond that. And the system is designed to be loaded at about that position. When we look at parafunction, their ability to go beyond that is sometimes exploited by the parafunctional condition. I call it the animal. You know, a class 3 edge-to-edge person, man, they can go way out. It looks like it can protrude a really long ways. No, it's just that they started at edge-to-edge. A class 2 long overbite, they can protrude the same amount. They get to edge. So the presentation symptomatically is completely different. We'll talk about that later. So when you get beyond these boundaries of time and intensity, you start to see signs and symptoms.